If you have ever, scrolled through photos of the Balearic Islands, especially Ibiza and Formentera, what they call the pitiusas, that signature color of the water, it's that almost impossible shimmering turquoise.
It looks fake, almost like it's lit from below.
Exactly. It's the very definition of crystal clear.
Yeah.
But the question is, what's the secret? What's the science behind it?
Well, and that clarity isn't just, a pretty picture for a travel brochure. It is the absolute foundation of the local ecosystem and, of course, their tourism.
Right. And for something that feels so magical, the source is completely biological, and it's something most of us have probably never even heard of.
Which is why this deep dive is so fascinating. The sources a listener sent in really zero in on this one organism, Posidonia Oceanica.
It's not just some background scenery. The sources make it clear this plant is the engine making the whole region work.
It really is. The listener was asking, why do they call it the crystal lung of the Balearics? What does it actually do? And why is it in trouble?
So that's our mission today. We're going to unpack why this ancient organism is so vital, why it guarantees that famous water clarity, and how it props up, really, the entire tourism industry there.
And I think we have to start with the most basic question. What is it? You've mentioned the crystal lung, the pulmon del mar, but before we get to that, we need to know what we're actually talking about.
Okay, so what's the big distinction? Because I think for most of us, you look underwater, you see green stuff, you just think seaweed or algae.
And that is the number one misconception the sources clear up immediately, and it's a critical point. Posidonia is a true marine plant. It is not an alga.
Okay, so why does that matter so much? Plant, alga. What's the difference?
It's a huge difference. True plants have roots, they have stems, they even have flowers. They're complex, organized, and this is the key, very slow-growing organisms.
So when we picture one of these meadows, we shouldn't think of like moss on a rock. We should be thinking of an actual underwater forest.
An ancient underwater forest. Exactly. Algae just sort of cling to things. Posidonia has these deep, complex root systems, they're called rhizomes, that dig into the seabed. It makes them incredibly stable, but also agonizingly slow to recover if they get damaged.
And that slow growth is the key to their vulnerability.
Absolutely. And it's those features that lead right back to that crystal lung nickname.
Right. Let's get into its main job, its ecological function.
So it's basically a twofold process. First, it's a giant natural filter. The meadows are so dense that they slow down the water right near the bottom.
Like a huge underwater speed bump.
A perfect analogy. And as the water slows, all the little bits of sediment, all the particles, they fall out of the water and get trapped in the root system.
That makes so much sense.
Oh,
You
yeah.
take away the filter.
You get cloudy water. Simple as that.
And the lung part.
That's the second function. Just like a forest on land, it photosynthesizes a lot. So it's constantly pumping pure oxygen into the water.
So it's the combination. The filtering cleans it, and the oxygenating makes it, sparkle. It gives it that bright turquoise color.
That's what creates that incredible visibility. And now we get to the scale of it all. This was the real aha moment for me in the sources.
Oh, this part is just mind-blowing. We're not talking about a little patch of seagrass here.
No, the main meadow, the one between Ibiza and Formentera, get this, it covers over 700 square kilometers.
700. That's bigger than many major cities. But the age is what really stops you in your tracks.
I know. The sources estimate that this one continuous plant is up to 100,000 years old.
100,000 years.
Yeah, I mean, think about that. The last ice age was still going on when this thing started growing. It's seen massive changes in sea level, climate, everything.
And because it's this single continuous organism that's so vast and so old, it holds a pretty unique title, doesn't it?
It does. It is recognized as the largest and oldest living organism on the planet.
Wow. When you realize you might be swimming over the largest living thing on Earth, and it's also basically a living fossil, it completely changes how you see that beautiful water.
It really should, and that's why it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It got that designation way back in 1999. They sometimes call them Neptune's Meadows, which is, a bit poetic, but it fits.
Okay, so it's ancient, it's massive, and it cleans the water.
Yeah.
But its job doesn't stop there. Let's talk about the thing that every tourist actually touches. The sand.
Right, the coastlines and the beaches. This connection between the plant and the sand is the single most surprising fact for most people.
It's not just protecting the coast from waves.
It does that too, for sure. That dense meadow dampens the power of waves before they hit the shore, which is a huge defense against erosion.
But the sand factory idea, how on earth does a plant make sand?
It's an amazing process. So when the leaves of the plant die and break off, they're full of calcium carbonate. Over time, the waves and the elements just break them down, grinding them into these tiny, fine white grains.
So you're saying the famous white sand isn't just like crushed shells and rocks. It's actually the decomposed skeleton of this plant.
A huge portion of it is, and the sources gave us a number on this that's just staggering.
This is the one. Let's hear it.
About 75% of the sand on the beaches in the Balearics originates from the remains of Posidonia.
I had to pause on that. 3/4 of the entire tourist attraction, the beautiful white beaches, is a byproduct of this ancient plant.
Without the meadows, you don't get the beaches. It's that direct. The entire product people are flying there to see is literally made by this organism.
Which brings us to its other huge role. It's not just a factory, it's also a city.
A bustling underwater city, yeah. It's the foundation of the whole ecosystem, a refuge for so much biodiversity.
The sources mentioned, over 1,000 species depend on these meadows.
They do. They use it as a nursery for their young, as a place to feed, a place to hide. The dense canopy is perfect protection.
And we're talking about important species, right? Not just tiny things.
Absolutely. Things like groupers, what they call meros, and more delicate species too, like seahorses, caballudos de mar, and cuttlefish. The whole food web is built on this. If the meadow goes, that all collapses.
So if you just connect the dots, clear water, coastal protection, sand for the beaches, a habitat for all the fish, without Posidonia.
The landscape erodes, the water gets murky, the marine life vanishes, and that multi-billion-dollar tourism industry, it goes right along with it.
It's a non-negotiable part of the equation, which makes the next part of this discussion so urgent. The threats. What is happening to this 100,000-year-old organism?
Unfortunately, the sources paint a pretty grim picture, and it's almost all human-driven. Let's start with the most direct physical damage. Boat anchoring, the fundeo.
Right, so people just drop their anchor wherever they want.
Pretty much. When a heavy anchor and its chain drag across the seabed, it's like plowing a field. It just rips the plant up by the roots, the rhizomes.
But if it's been there for 100,000 years, you'd think it would be tough. Why can't it just grow back?
Yeah. Because it grows so slowly. We're talking maybe 1 centimeter a year. That's it. So if an anchor rips out a patch that took 1,000 years to grow,
it's not coming back in our lifetime.
Not in our lifetime or our children's or our grandchildren's. It can take centuries to recover. You're doing millennia of damage in seconds.
That really reframes the idea of just dropping anchor for a few hours. Okay, so that's the physical damage. What about chemical threats?
The sources point to general pollution, vertidos contaminantes. So things like poorly treated sewage or agricultural runoff.
And what does that do to the plant?
Posidonia is really sensitive to too many nutrients in the water. That pollution fertilizes these faster-growing algae and organisms that basically grow on top of the Posidonia leaves.
Oh, I see. So they cover them up.
Exactly. They block the sunlight, and the plant can't photosynthesize. It basically gets smothered to death by its competition.
And on top of all that, you have the big one, climate change.
That's the stressor that affects everything. The Mediterranean is warming up, and Posidonia is already living at the upper edge of its temperature tolerance. So these summer heat waves are causing huge die-offs.
And then there's the last threat, which is so counterintuitive, the one that happens right on the beach.
The beach cleanup, yes. You see those piles of dark, dried leaves washed up on the shore.
And you think it's messy, right? You want to rake it all up and have a perfect, clean beach.
Right. But that dead material, that erosion, is the isler's natural defense system. It holds the beach in place, it protects the dunes from wind, and, as we said, it's the raw material for new sand.
So when we clean it up for aesthetic reasons, we're actually speeding up erosion and throwing away the future of the beach itself.
We're literally dismantling the factory and the seawall at the same time.
And this isn't just a theory, is it? The sources had some hard numbers on the losses.
They did. In some areas, especially around Formentera, they've recorded losses of 30 to 40% of the meadows.
30 to 40%. Losing almost half of an irreplaceable ancient habitat? That's an emergency.
It absolutely is, which thankfully is leading to some action.
Okay, so let's shift to solutions. What can be done? What's happening on the ground to try and save the crystal lung?
Well, conservation efforts are definitely scaling up. One of the big ones is the Save Posidonia project. It's based on this idea of a padrinazgo.
Which is like a sponsorship program.
Exactly. You can adopt or sponsor a few square meters of the meadow. It makes this huge abstract problem feel personal and gives people a way to contribute directly.
And what about replanting? Is that even possible, given how slowly it grows?
It's incredibly difficult, but it is happening. The sources mentioned a project that replanted about 1,500 individual plants in Formentera. It's a massive effort for a small area, but it shows that restoration is possible. It just takes a huge commitment.
And beyond the direct action, what about changing people's behavior? Education seems key here.
It's vital. They're doing things like running excursions on boats with glass bottoms or even submarine viewing windows.
So people can actually see the meadows for themselves.
Yes, so they can see this vibrant living underwater forest and understand what's at stake. And of course, lots of campaigns against plastic pollution and promoting just, being more mindful in the water.
Okay, so let's make this really practical. For anyone listening who might be planning a trip there or just wants to be a better environmental steward, what are the top takeaways from the sources? What can you do?
Number one, without a doubt, is about anchoring. You have to anchor only in the designated sandy zones. There are maps, there are buoys. You must strictly avoid dropping your anchor on the dark patches on the meadows themselves.
That seems like the single biggest thing. And what about on the beach?
That aesthetic trade-off we talked about, the sources are clear. Leave the Posidonia remains on the beach. Those dark leaves are not trash. They are protecting the dunes and making new sand. Let them be.
And finally, just getting involved.
Yeah, supporting local projects, maybe even participating in a beach cleanup. It's a way to turn that awareness into actual impact, because preserving the Posidonia is how you preserve those crystal clear waters for everyone.
This has been, wow, an incredible deep dive. We started with this beautiful image of turquoise water, and we've ended up with this ancient 100,000-year-old organism.
The largest on the planet.
The largest on the planet. A plant that both filters the water to make it clear and creates 3/4 of the sand for the beaches.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to think of a more vital organism that so few people have even heard of.
It's a non-negotiable cornerstone of that entire world. And it leaves you with a really challenging thought, I think, when you consider just how ancient and slow-growing it is.
Yeah.
You know, taking centuries to recover from a few seconds of damage.
Mm-hmm.
It makes you ask, how should our responsibility to preserve a 100,000-year-old system change the conversation we have about our desire for, quick, easy, short-term convenience when we're on vacation?
That's a powerful way to frame it. Does my convenience of anchoring my boat right here, right now, outweigh the survival of this ancient living system?
It's a calculation every single visitor has to make. We'd really encourage you, before you go, to look up the specific anchoring maps and the marine preserve zones for the Balearics. Understanding them and following them is probably the most important thing you can do to become a true steward of that sea.